Coming up on today's show, we're going to look at some Broncos head coaching targets. But before we get to that, I want you guys to be a part of the show. Who do you want to be the next Broncos head coach? Let me know what names you're thinking in the comments section below. And also, stay tuned towards the end of the show because a little behind the scenes here, a little peek at how we operate at Chat Sports. The Jerod Mayo news, which was the Broncos requested to interview the Patriots linebacker coach, was broken to me towards the tail end of the video. So stay tuned for that. All that and more coming up on today's Broncos Breakdown. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown. I'm your host, Matthew Peterson. I've got a handful of names coming at you guys today as we are in full search mode looking for the next Broncos head coach. So, before we get into the list, just two quick notes. One, I've got 10 names plus honorable mention, so be sure to stay tuned for all of that just to see what everything that's floating out there is about. Second note, this is a list that's kind of a mix of what I would like to see happen versus what I'm hearing coming out of Mile High, what the rumors are about the direction George Paton is going. So find some kind of balance between these two. And that's what leads me to my first name. It is a former player and linebacker coach, Jerod Mayo. Yeah, didn't expect to have him in the coaching carousel, but his name has been floated around enough and connected to Denver. Maybe Paton wants to go defense again. He did that in Minnesota with Zimmer, so I could kind of see it happen, but I don't know. I don't want to see it happen. It seems a little too early for Mayo. Let him get a coordinator role, and then he can graduate to head coach. Number 9, Leslie Frazier. Again, these are two names that I personally don't want to see be the next head coach of the Broncos for two very different reasons. Mayo, a little too early in my opinion, not even a coordinator just yet. And Frazier seems a little bit out of it in terms of he hasn't been a head coach in quite some time. He was the Vikings, I wonder where the ties are there for Zimmer, head coach way back when in Minnesota. He's been the DC for Buffalo. But listen, George, don't go back in time. Leslie Frazier's done a great job with the Bills defense this season, but you don't want to hire an aging defensive-minded guy. I'm sorry, you call me an ageist, but it just isn't the sexy and trending move right now. And if you're George, you're like, I'm playing with house money because I killed the draft last year. I made some excellent trades so far. Don't go out and hire a older DC that just isn't going to, get butts in seats, in my opinion, if things don't go well early. Number 8 on my list, it is Eric Bienemy, the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. I should also add at this point that the Broncos can only interview the number 1 seed coordinators, and so that is the Titans, and I don't see any Titans coordinators getting poached. And then on the NFC side, the Green Bay Packers, which may be in this video later on. But for Bienemy, here's what I'll say about him. Here's my quick spiel about Bienemy. One, I'd be curious to see if the Chiefs would allow Bienemy to talk to the Broncos just because. Do they want to see their OC go to a team that plays them twice a year? Maybe I'm overthinking this, but I think that's worth mentioning. And then Bienemy's offense for the Chiefs has kind of it went downhill a little bit this year. I would say his stock was highest last coaching carousel. Got passed up. He's got a couple skeletons in his closet. I won't air them out in the show, but you can go to Wikipedia and look at them yourself. Kellen Moore is the next one on my list. Number 7. I'd like to see him higher, but I'm not seeing his name tossed out a ton right now in Denver, which makes me think maybe George just isn't interested in a young, sexy, up-and-coming, offensive-minded guy like Kellen Moore. So that's why I got him at 7 right now. But he is probably the hottest name in coaching carousel talk at the moment. Been the hottest kind of all season long. He's had this Cowboys offense number 1 since the get-go, and he's 33, and everyone is chasing, right, the next Sean McVay, the next young and up-and-coming offensive-minded guy. So it very well could be Kellen Moore's season. I think he's going to get hired. I think he will be a head coach next season. I don't know if it'll be in Denver. Number 6 on my list, sticking in the NFC East, it is Jonathan Gannon. A household name, right? Everyone knows John. No, he's a DC out in Philly for the Eagles. And he's in his first year of it. And I've seen his name talked a bunch in Denver coaching rumor circles, which is why I have him at 6. He wouldn't be 6 on my dream list, but like I said, this is a combination of what I'm hearing versus what I like to see happen. But let's get back to the Gannon notes. He does fit the mold of a young coach, which is the direction teams are going. And I'm sorry if I'm beating a dead horse on this, but I just keep hearing this. So he's 39 years old. Denver, like I said, has been rumored to be interested in him. Look at the defensive stats now between when he took over in 2021 versus 2020. Improvements, right? He's gotten yards per game, passing, rushing down. Sacks went way up. His pass rush in Philly this year has been awful. Takeaways, kind of the same, went down a little bit. He's giving up less points per game. But I look at these numbers, and I don't see anything that really jumps off the page as have to hire him now. He's going to be poached. He's a rising star. Maybe he could be. But I think it's a little early for that right now. So I don't fully get the let's hop into bed with Gannon. I think you should wait a little bit. He's only been a DC for 1 season, still pretty young in his coaching career. But speaking of offense and defense, who would you want the coach to be for the Broncos? Do you want to be an offensive-minded guy or a defensive-minded guy? This will be the pinned comment on today's show. So if a YouTube ad break comes on by, give me an O for offense or a D for defense down below. Here's what I'll tell you guys. The rumors and signs coming out of Mile High right now and Doe Valley are pretty split as to what direction they are going. Remember, you got to look at who's making the call, right? George Paton, defensive-ish guy in Minnesota, has a defensive head coach in Denver with Fangio. He kind of, I think, leans that way on the alley, so I think I wouldn't be blown away if they hire a defensive guy, even though everyone's going offense. Don't rule out defense. Number 5 on my list is someone that I think is criminally low. I think I've had him 1 on just about every list before. Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator for the Bills. Again, it is tough to stay at the top as a coordinator for years and years, meaning he was looked at last year. It is not easy to stay number 1 for that long, but I'd love to see Brian Daboll be in orange and blue. I don't know if it's trending that direction, though. It's just one of those things where you go on Twitter, you listen to the podcast, you talk to the insiders, and you notice a couple resurfacing names, and Daboll isn't at the top of that list. So I'd love to see him there, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Make sure you subscribe, by the way, before we get on to the next name here, because here's the deal. When the Broncos make a hire, you're going to want a video about it. You're going to want to get all the homework on who this guy is, all the notes. So subscribe today, because I bet that hire comes out within a week. Here's a fun note. Broncos hired Vic Fangio 3 years ago yesterday. On the day he was hired, he's also fired, January 9th. So I bet it'll be about a week, because the NFL season was a week later. So usually this stuff happens a week after the season ends. So sometime next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But when a video comes out, when the hiring comes out, we'll have a video. So subscribe today to the channel. All right, we're going to power through here. On to numbers 4 through 1. It is Byron Leftwich, a guy I've had lower on my list because of the experience, but maybe Denver wants to make him the next head coach. So he's been the Bucs OC since 2019, and he's done a great job at that. No doubt about it. The Bucs offense has been top 5 in scoring under him. They were 4th and 19. Remember, Brady wasn't there then. That was Jameis Winston. 2020, he's got him 3rd. 2021, this year, he's got him 2nd. But the question I got to ask, is it Byron Leftwich or is it Tom Brady? It's some combination, but I can't pinpoint if it's 90% Brady and 10% Leftwich, because here's a name that kind of fell in this category. Remember Adam Gase, right? Former OC for the Broncos, kind of rode the coattails of Peyton Manning, and it got him a head coaching gig. And maybe after he was fizzled out of New York and Miami, people look back and go, maybe it was more of who he was around and less of him. We're going to get to number 3 in just a moment, but let me tell you about our sportsbook partner, BetUS. If you haven't joined already, do so right now, because they got a 125% deposit bonus going when you go to chatsports.com/bet. Promo code right there, Broncos125. There's a lot of fun things you can bet on, like the NBA or some Super Bowl odds. So I got some Super Bowl odds here. The Packers are the favorites right now at plus 375. What that means is if you bet $100, which Vegas works out of because they got way bigger pockets than I do, you get $375. So you get your $100 back plus 375 on top of it. So if you got a good gut feeling about who's winning the Super Bowl, make the bet now, because once the wild card round starts, these odds will go up and down, and this will be the best value you get them at. So if you got a good feeling, make it right now at BetUS. Speaking of the Packers, Nathaniel Hackett, the OC, is number 3 on my list, and that's because it looks like Denver is a big fan of his. He's been in Green Bay as the offensive coordinator since 2019. Now, he is not the play caller. That duty falls to the head coach, Matt LaFleur, which I think is worth noting because a lot of teams have made some mistakes of hiring offensive coordinators who weren't play callers and then became a play caller with their new regime, and it didn't work very well. You like to see some experience with play calling, but here's the thing. Hackett could lure Aaron Rodgers. However, I don't think you can hire a guy because of the possibility of a quarterback coming with. That's an awful approach to something, to go, we're going to hire you because one of the top things on your pro list is maybe you could get Rodgers. What if you don't get Rodgers and you look at Hackett and go, well, that was his biggest pro. The rest of the pros don't stack up to the other guys we had on our list. So do not make the mistake of hiring someone because of the possibility of who they could bring. Looking ahead here a little bit, though, what would the Broncos' record be in 2022? Well, let me know what you think. I had this team before the season. I think I said they were a 9-8 team. I had them above 500. Finished just below 7-10. Easily could have been 8-9 if the fourth quarter goes better on Saturday. But let me know. I want to know what you guys have to say. Way too early record predictions in the comment section below. Number 2 on my list, I added them this morning. As we record right now on a Monday morning here, Brian Flores, the former head coach for the Miami Dolphins, he was fired by the organization early on Monday as we record this, and what I would say was a very surprising move. Had this team moving, had a 7-game winning streak this year, finished 1 game out of the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, above 500 2 straight years, does finish just below 500 as his career record in Miami at 24-23. But here's what I'll say about Flores. I don't think he's going to get rehired I don't think he's going to get hired and go back and be a defensive coordinator like he was for the Patriots. I think it's more like an Andy Reid hiring where he's going to go, or Adam Gase, from head coach to head coach. And I wouldn't be shocked if Paton looks at this and go, he wasn't on my list because I didn't think he'd be fired. But now that he is, we got to take a hard look at this guy because he has done a lot of great things for Miami, and he may just be a confident and solid, grounded quarterback away from running a team to the playoffs. Drum roll, please. Number 1 is Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, number 1 for my list, and the reason being is he's the biggest name I'm seeing floated out right now. The defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. The Broncos maybe have a big crush on good old Dan Quinn, who looks great in a backwards hat, by the way. But here's the history of Dan Quinn. You go back to his previous head coaching job. He was the head coach with the Atlanta Falcons. And before you go, no, I don't want Dan Quinn. He had a bad ending with the Falcons, 28-3. I'm going to show a stat later on in the video that looks at some previous head coaches I think you'll be very interested in. But back to good old Dan. Maybe a second chance is what he needs. He's done phenomenal things in Dallas for this defense. Look, we'll get the defensive stats here in front of you. Look at the Cowboys' defensive stats from before he took over to after he took over. The 2 biggest things I'm looking at right now is points per game. He shaved off a complete touchdown in 1 offseason. That's that's a huge thing right now to be giving up 1 less touchdown. And then takeaways. He's got them number 1 in the NFL in takeaways. Yards come and go, garbage time. I don't think they're the best way to evaluate the best way to evaluate a coordinator because a lot goes into yards in terms of garbage yards and things like that. But I'm looking at points per game and takeaways. But I want to ask this question to you guys. Would you hire a former head coach? Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. I want to know what you guys think because I'm not opposed to it whatsoever, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But first, let's run through my top 10 list here. Jerod Mayo, there's a requested interview. Okay, so producer Sam in my ear right now, just right now from Adam Schefter, the Broncos have a requested interview with Jerod Mayo, which has to shoot him from 10 to 6. So we'll record this now, but we're moving on the fly here. Leslie Frazier, Bienemy, Kellen Moore. Wow, did not see that coming so early. Daboll at 5, Leftwich at 4, Hackett at 3, Brian Flores at 2, and Dan Quinn at 1. Let's go to full screen, Sam, because let's talk about Jerod Mayo for just a second, because this is breaking as I'm a talking monkey up here. Jerod Mayo, a requested interview reported by Adam Schefter. That's big news. For George Paton's first interview, as far as I can tell, requested to be Jerod Mayo, that's something right there. This has some legs to it, so keep an eye on Mayo. But I want to go back to the script here. Some food for thought. These are some head coaches that have done phenomenal things, have won multiple Super Bowls for a handful of them, and also were fired at one point as a head coach. Bill Belichick used to be the head coach of the Browns. Probably the biggest eyesore for Cleveland, letting that man walk out the building. Tom Coughlin, the head coach for the Jags. Tony Dungy was the head coach for the Raiders. Gary Kubiak and Mike Shanahan. Broncos fans, Broncos country. You don't have to look that far back to remember that a second chance for a lot of these coaches is all they need. Kubiak won a Super Bowl as his second head coaching stint. Mike Shanahan, people forget, was a head coach for the Raiders, and that didn't go well. And he learned from his mistakes, and he improved and applied that to Denver, where he would go on to win multiple Super Bowls. Other names, though, you should keep your eyes on. Mike Zimmer just recently let go from the Vikings. I got him on here because he's got Peyton's number. They overlapped in Minnesota, so maybe those two are texting right now. Dougie P., former Super Bowl winning head coach for the Eagles. I wanted to include in my top 10. Just haven't heard enough buzz around his name. Kevin O'Connell, he's the OC for the Rams. Marcus Brady, the OC for the Colts. Although, after yesterday, I don't know how this guy could get a head coaching interview. That offense was just awful against the Jags. And finally, it is Brian Callahan, the OC for the Bengals, who's got Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase looking like the NFL Rookie of the Year, and maybe if it wasn't for Dak Prescott being a bigger name than Joe Burrow, the NFL Comeback Player of the Year. We're going to have more coaching news, rumors, carousel, all that coming your way here on the channel, so make sure you are subscribed, and we'll catch you later here on the Broncos Breakdown.